It was a 40-minute bike ride to my school, and so when I first started going, I spent some time looking around for shortcuts on my way back home. One day, I found a path that ran alongside the river, with a concrete wall on the other side. It was pretty narrow, but there were quite a few people using it. It was completely straight with no branching paths. But then, as the number of people dwindled, I realized something odd. The path was a dead end. But as I turned and started walking back, a chill ran down my spine. If this path was a dead end, then where on earth had all those people come from? Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, volume 16, is now available. If you want even more creepy tales of ghosts, haunted buildings, curses, mysterious rituals, and much more, make sure to check it out right now. And if you're looking for more to listen to, you can also find the audiobook for the first volume of Toshiden, either on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, or various audiobook outlets, including Spotify and Audible, so don't miss out on that either if you're still looking for more. This week, we're looking at some weird and unsettling tales that'll keep you thinking long into the night. What's really going on here? First up, a group of friends go on a trip and stay in a cheap guest house that has a strange rundown building outside. Is this derelict building really as empty as it seems? Find out in Second Floor. This story is no laughing matter, but it's perhaps also a little scary. I'm not really sure, but I was summoned by the police over this, so either way, it was pretty messed up. A while back, when I was still a university student, I went on a trip with a few friends from my school club. Most of us were pretty poor, so we stayed in a cheap guest house we heard about from a friend. Next to this guest house, there was an old building that looked like a cabin or shed. It was pretty run down, but also oddly large. As she was looking at it, one of the girls who had a strong sixth sense started trembling. "The second floor is dangerous. Something's looking at us. I can't stay here," she said, before suddenly going home. That night, we ate dinner and played with some fireworks, but as we soon found ourselves with nothing to do, we started discussing a visit to that big old building outside. 2 of the girls agreed to join us, so it was 5 of us guys and 2 girls. As soon as we got there, the place felt rather creepy. There was a huge door on the first floor, and when we opened it, there was a large open space with a dirt floor, like a barn or somewhere you might store farming equipment. Then, we heard a noise above us, like something was moving around in the ceiling. And someone outside shouted, "Hey, the lights are on! The lights are on!" I went outside for a moment and looked up. Light spilt from an upstairs window. "Oh shit," someone said. "They're gonna be pissed," someone else said. The window opened and a person stuck their head out. Because of the light behind them, their face was too dark to see. I was honestly pretty scared. Then the person seemed to motion for us to come up. "Hey, don't just stand there. Come on up." The voice sounded unexpectedly young, so I was a little relieved. "Come on, I've got some drinks up here," the voice continued. And so we made our way up. A set of stairs by the wall led us up. At first it was pretty dark, but when we reached the landing, there were a few lights brightening the place up. Beyond an open door, a man in his 30s or so sat on the other side of a table, covered in food and beer cans. There was something almost Indian about the room. It was decorated with wood carvings and musical instruments, as well as posters of richly coloured deities and movies. The room was massive, but the lights it did have were rather small, so they barely reached the corners. "Come, have a beer," the man said, offering some of his beer and food. We sat and started drinking with him. The man told us about his trips to India and what type of music he was into lately. He was playing a CD rather loud, and one of the girls asked if it was okay for him to be playing music so loudly at night. "It's fine," he said, and turned it up even louder. When I looked at the time, I realized it was rather late, and we decided it was time to head back. The man joined us at the entrance to see us off. The next morning, the woman from the guest house came to see us as we were eating breakfast. "Did you go into that building last night?" she asked. "We did," we said. "And there was nothing there?" she asked. On the drive back home, we asked the girl who didn't join us about the noise. "Wasn't it loud?" "No, I didn't really hear anything," she said. "I heard some music, so I looked up at that window and I saw a small light beneath it. But then it disappeared and I heard the door at the bottom opening." "For real?" M, one of the guys who was with us, said when he heard that. Then he continued. "There was a landing at the top of those stairs, right? It was kinda hard to see, but there was a door there in the wall. I didn't think much of it at the time, but on the way back, that door was slightly open. I thought I was just seeing things though." "Eh? So, you're saying we drank on the 3rd floor?" I asked, panicking a little. "So then, the noise we heard when we were downstairs, that was actually..." Looking back on it now, there were several things that didn't make any sense. When we entered that building, the window on the 3rd floor was pitch black. That floor should have been one large open room. So, until we arrived, what was that man doing in the dark? And the food. There was way too much for a single person to eat. And it was warm. Was he waiting for somebody? In the dark? Somebody other than us? As we tried to figure it out in the car, it creeped me out more and more. Something's not right here. Seriously, what the hell? When we got back, that girl who suddenly left before us had apparently gone missing. We asked her roommate about it, and it seemed she returned to her apartment that night, but after that, she suddenly vanished. Her room wasn't a mess, but nor was it especially clean. It looked like she had perhaps just stepped out to do some shopping, and that was it. And to this day, that girl still hasn't been found. In this next story, a man notices some people at work on the weekend, which is odd as one of them is supposed to be at the theme park with his family on that particular day. What's really going on and who exactly is in the office? Find out in Day Off. This is my first time writing here, but please hear me out. Last Sunday, I visited the dentist near my office. Once I was done there, I looked up at our building and saw a figure standing in the window to my department. Looking closer, there appeared to be a few people there, maybe 3 to 5, and one of them looked just like the colleague I was friendliest with. Are they working on their day off? I thought. But then I remembered that he said he was visiting Disney Sea with his family on Sunday. Huh? I thought, so I called him on the spot. I watched him very clearly through the window take his phone out of his pocket and put it to his ear. "Hey, what's up?" he said. "What are you doing right now?" "What do you mean? I'm at Disney Sea. We're lined up at 20,000 leagues under the sea." "Eh? So you're not at work then?" At that very moment, the phone hung up. The figure in the window started scanning the area outside the window. And then, for a second, our eyes met. I broke out in goosebumps all over. Normally, this colleague was always smiley and cheerful, but the guy looking back at me looked dead behind the eyes. There was no expression on his face whatsoever. It was incredibly off-putting, so I got the hell out of there right away. The next day, I was a little scared, but I wanted to make sure of what happened the day before, so I summoned up all my courage and asked that colleague again what he did the day before. "So, you really did go to Disney Sea yesterday, right?" "Huh? Why do you ask? Why do you want to know so much? You made that weird call yesterday as well, right? You're acting weird," he said with a laugh. "No, just yesterday I could have sworn I saw you here at work." In an instant, it was like the air froze, and I could feel icy gazes upon me from all around. A chill ran down my spine. "Huh? What on earth are you talking about? I was at Disney Sea all day yesterday with my family. Look, here are some of the photos we took." My colleague took his phone out and showed me various pictures of his family at Disney Sea. His daughter certainly was adorable, and the date on them all said Sunday. What on earth was going on? He even brought back some crunky chocolate as a gift, but I was too scared to eat it. And ever since then, it feels like not just that colleague, but everyone at work has started acting a little strangely. Like, their behavior towards me is kind of unnatural. We still go out for drinks after work and such, but sometimes when I sense eyes upon me and turn around, I'll find one of them staring at me with no expression on their face. It's just honestly frightening. I'm starting to seriously think about changing jobs. I don't have anyone I can talk to about this, so I decided to write about it here instead. Completely by chance, the man in this next story comes across an old friend of his online. They start catching up and reminiscing about the old days, but then one day, this friend suddenly disappears. What happened to him? And what's really going on? Find out in Old Friend. At the beginning of last autumn, I unexpectedly came across a website built by my friend H, who I was good friends with back in university. I wouldn't exactly say we were best friends, but we both enjoyed motorbikes, so we often went riding together. It was a fairly standard website where he talked about his hobbies and treated it like a blog. Seemed he was still fond of riding his bike, and it got me thinking of the old days. So I decided to send him a message. He soon replied. Apparently, he continued doing research at university, and now he was working as an assistant at a university in N Prefecture, where his family was from. I also worked as a researcher, and it seemed our fields were closely related. So despite the fact that 10 years had passed since we last spoke to each other, we hit it off again right away. We exchanged messages on weekends and days off for around 3 months. And then suddenly, one day, I got an interesting message from H. That reminds me, do you remember M Restaurant? I went on a day trip to S City last week and I stopped by there. That same old woman is still running the place and she's as healthy as ever. I got a huge serving of katsudon, just like I always used to. The taste hasn't changed, and I almost cried while I was eating it. The old woman was so happy that she almost cried too. We even spoke about you. She still remembers you quite well. Next time, you should bring him too, she said, squeezing my hands. Let's head back there together sometime and eat some warm katsudon. M Restaurant was a pretty popular spot with students because it was near our university, and H and I were regular customers there. Shortly before I graduated, I heard from a different friend that the old man who ran the place died, so his wife continued running it alone. And so, thanks to all this, I got the urge to ride again. On weekends, I started going out to see if I could find a reasonably priced second-hand one. However, after sending me that message, H suddenly stopped contacting me. I was busy with work myself, so I figured he probably was too. And for a while, I forgot all about that restaurant and finding a bike. 1 month passed. And then 2. I still hadn't heard from H. He generally updated his website once every 3 days, but he hadn't touched that either. Curious, I decided to call him on my next day off. However, it wasn't H who answered, but rather an elderly woman. I told her my name and said I was a friend from university. Seemed she was his mother. H passed away last month, she said in a low voice. Hearing that, I was shocked. I expressed my condolences and asked if I could visit to light some incense for him. On my next day off, I went to N Prefecture and visited H's parents' house. They were still utterly shocked at the loss of their son. I prayed before his altar and then carefully asked his parents how he died. His mother remained silent, staring at the floor the whole time. But after a moment, his father, who was sitting next to her, replied, "He killed himself." "There's no way he would do such a thing. No way," his mother repeated, burying her face in her handkerchief. His father asked me if I had any idea why he might do such a thing, but I couldn't think of anything. As I stood there in silence, his father continued. "Why on earth did he visit S City? Maybe he was remembering the good old days right at the end." My mind went blank. Taking my leave, I exited the house. Something didn't feel right, so I decided to drive straight to S City myself. When I got there, it was already starting to get dark. I didn't have time to reminisce about the past, so I made my way straight towards my old apartment. Not a single thing had changed about the area. H's apartment, which was at the rear of the same block, was still the same as well. I walked around the area for a while, and then stopped in front of a certain house. It was a regular house where the first floor had been renovated into a storefront. M Restaurant. It also looked exactly the same. But now it appeared that nobody lived there. I stood in front of it for a while, and then a middle-aged woman from a nearby house came out to greet me. She looked suspiciously at me, but I told her that I used to live around here when I was a student. At that, she relaxed. "I was wondering who might be standing around at this time of night. I thought you might be another curious onlooker." "You didn't hear? A man died in this house last month. I don't know why he did it in this empty house, but on that exact day 1 year ago, the old woman who lived here also died. So people have been talking about how he was perhaps drawn here. The woman continued talking about that, but I don't really remember what I said before I left. When I got back home, I had to take the next 2 days off work because I had a high fever. In this next story, a group of kids hear about a scary photo hidden somewhere in a rundown takoyaki store. They decide to look for it, but what is the truth behind this strange photo? Could it actually be closer to home than they yet realize? Find out in Scary Photo. I think this happened when I was in the 5th or 6th grade. There was this small rundown takoyaki shop on the side of the national highway. Inside were some old pachinko machines and a discarded pile of dirty magazines, so kids often tried to sneak in through a window to get to them. One day, one of those kids by the name of Kanemitsu said, "There's this really scary photo in there. I haven't seen it myself, but someone who did was so scared that he had to take the next day off school." For some reason, he was talking about it like he himself was responsible for it. So, after school one day, me, Kanemitsu, and a few other guys decided to visit that takoyaki shop. We climbed in through the window, and right there on the ground, we found that pile of dirty magazines, and some other comics and magazines too. The only thing I was interested in was the dirty magazines, but I didn't let my friends know that. "Kanemitsu, where's this photo?" everyone asked, and we began our search. They said it was in here somewhere," Kanemitsu said as he opened the fridge. Inside there were a few dozen photos. I don't remember what they were of, but for some reason there was at least one inappropriate photo in there as well. However, we soon found the scary photo in question. In the lower left corner, you could see a really blurry woman's face. Her skin was pure white. But this face, how can I put it? It was like it had just been slapped there, like it was a flat cutout, you know? Either way, it didn't really look three-dimensional, but the creepiest part of all was the woman's eyes. The black part of them was just an outline, and the inside was all white. Her pupils looked like someone drew a circle with a thin brush. Being just kids, however, we found the dirty photo far more impactful. "Oh my god, that's terrifying," we said, putting it into each other's pockets as a prank. After that, we went through the magazines and then we went home around 5 p.m. As I was getting changed into my tracksuit at home, I noticed there was a photo in my pocket. "Oh, there's no way," I thought. But when I looked at it, it was the photo of that woman. Holding it in my hands, I once again took a close look at it, and something about it felt weird. The scenery behind the woman's face, it seemed somewhat familiar to me. After dinner, I was watching TV in the living room when it suddenly hit me. Wait, isn't that the view from the hallway window on the second floor? Immediately, I ran upstairs and over to that window. I wasn't especially scared. If anything, I was curious. I looked outside and, just like I thought, the view was exactly the same as that photo. The types and locations of the buildings, the railway bridge, and even the mountains in the distance. Splat! For a moment, my eyes went blurry, and I couldn't tell what I was looking at. My gaze drifted to the lower left of the window. A woman's white pupils were pressed right against the window glass. In this next story, a young boy visits an abandoned factory after school one day, and there he finds something intriguing but also kinda weird. An abandoned mannequin under some rubbish. But what's the real story behind it, and will this become an event that haunts him for the rest of his life? Find out in Mannequin Factory. Things often happened when I was a child that I never gave a second thought to. But later, as I got older, suddenly those same events took on a different meaning and sent chills down my spine. This sort of thing happened quite often. Like, when I was in elementary school, my road to school was surrounded on all sides but nothing but rice fields. On the way, there was this run-down mannequin factory and, long after that, a single candy store. Other than that, the only thing you could see was the occasional house amongst the rice fields. This mannequin factory had long shut down, and I don't recall ever seeing anyone working there. The lot was sealed shut, but there was a pile of mannequins in the corner of the grounds, covered in wire netting that you could see. It was both interesting and creepy. A large ditch ran around the factory grounds, and it gave off a terrible smell. The water was muddy and like sludge. People often dumped their trash there. One day, I took a different way home and ended up behind that factory. The ditch back there was in way worse condition than what you could see from the front. And there, mixed in with all the rubbish, I could see the top half of a female mannequin. Her pale, pretty features almost made her look like a jewel in a dunghill, as the saying goes. I thought that if I could pull that mannequin out and take it back to our favourite hangout, my friends would think I was really cool. But the water was dirty and it was really far away, so I gave up. But I didn't want anyone else to take it and be the cool kid, so I never told another soul about it. But for a while after that, it became almost a daily routine to check on the mannequin. Bit by bit, day by day, she deteriorated more and more. After just a few days, her white skin turned dirty, and she was a mere shadow of her former self. Finally, her thick hair fell out as well, leaving her bald. Her once youthful-looking skin was now black and lumpy, like a rat had taken bites out of her. Nothing stays the same forever. All things must pass. Before long, I quickly lost interest in her. The last time I saw her, she was buried beneath rubbish that covered the water's surface, and because the water was so dirty, you could barely see her at all. The part I could just barely see above the water also looked bloated. Now, she was truly nothing more than trash. It wasn't until quite some time later that I went back to check on her again. However, the mannequin was no longer there. Time passed, I graduated from elementary school, and I never walked that way again. During the summer holidays of my final year of high school, I decided to ride around some of my old haunting grounds. I visited that factory, of course, and now everything had changed. Most of the rice fields were gone, replaced with residential housing, and the factory had been turned into a parking lot. Remembering that mannequin, I got lost in thought. And then suddenly, it hit me. A terrifying idea. Plastic doesn't decay like that, right? I was at an age where I'd seen lots of gruesome pictures over the years, and because of that, I couldn't shake off the horrid thought that had invaded my mind. Wasn't that exactly how a decaying body looked? I honestly have no idea what happened back then. However, this once nostalgic memory has now become something horrifying that I can't ever talk to anyone else about. And finally this week, a university student gets a part-time job offer that's simply too good to refuse. 100,000 yen for 1 night and 2 days' work related to his field of study. But for that much money, there has to be a catch, right? What's really going on at this strange site hidden all the way out in the mountains? Find out in Excessively Well-Paid Job. This happened when I was in university. It's a strange and perhaps ultimately pointless story, but let me write it down. I majored in archaeology at a university in the Kanto area, and this happened during the summer holidays of my 3rd year. There was this older student from our department who, to be honest, didn't have the best reputation and spent most of his time hitting local pachinko parlors. But one day, he came to me with a job offer. The pay was a ridiculous 100,000 yen for 1 night and 2 days of work, and he explained that it was related to my field of study. "You're not gonna make me rob some graves or anything, are you?" I asked. "Well, it's not like it's legal, exactly, but we're not destroying any remains or selling cultural assets or stuff like that. You're the only guy I know that's fit for this job though, so please," he said. He seemed rather desperate and I was in need of money, so I quickly agreed. I made my way towards the designated parking lot in the morning, and a panel van was already waiting. They made me sit in the 3rd row, and inside, black curtains had been drawn to cover all the windows. Is this some sort of action movie? I thought to myself. And on the way, I felt the van climbing a mountain, and then we entered a gravelly road. After about 3 hours, the van stopped. "We're here," the young driver with short hair said. When I got out, as I expected, we were on a mountain somewhere. We were about halfway up, and most of the trees and such had been cleared. A few prefab buildings had also been set up. It certainly didn't look like an archaeological ruin. It was a natural mountain, and I couldn't even see any construction work. A man in a suit who looked to be in his 30s quickly approached us. "Ah, thank you for coming. Nice to meet you," he said with a faint smile. "So, you want me to look at some earthenware and estimate its rough age, right?" I asked. That's right. I heard you're the best, so it should be an easy job," the man replied. He then led me to a large prefab building, and an office was set up on the 1st floor. A chill ran down my spine the moment I entered. An industrial-sized air conditioner was running, and it was probably less than 20 degrees in there. I sat at a desk covered in newspaper, and nervously, I turned to the man. "These haven't been obtained by illegally digging, right?" No, we're just verifying the age. It's for academic purposes, and once we're done, we'll be burying them again. We won't be damaging the site, and it won't affect your future in any way either," the man said, before exiting the building. I'd been looking at a book on earthenware chronology for less than an hour when the man came back, talking on his phone. "The first lot will be here shortly. Please put these in," he said, handing me some earplugs. Confused, I did as he said, and when he was done talking on the phone, he did the same. I went outside, and a panel van similar to the one I'd come here in entered the lot. 3 men in work clothes got out and then opened the back of the van. 2 of them lifted out a rather large hemp sack and carried it towards the large prefab building. They held it by the front and rear, but The sack seemed to almost move, as though it were alive. It bulged here and there, like an animal was pushing its legs against it from the inside. I might have screamed, but I had those earplugs in, so it was hard to tell. The other worker brought over a wooden box with a complete piece of earthenware, and the three of us then entered the building. Earthenware can generally be separated into 5 different categories. For example, from the kinky area during the yayoi period, etc. It gets a little more complicated depending on the area, but you get the idea. Taking out my earplugs, I gave a rough estimate of the earthenware's age, referring to the book I had with me, and the man wrote it down. The other thing the men carried in, was it alive? I asked. The man took a long, hard look at my face before answering. Oh my, did that bag look like it was moving to you? Wow, you must have some special abilities to see that. Oh my, indeed. I didn't understand what he was saying, but in the end, he said nothing more on the matter. 3 cars had arrived by that evening, and each time they showed me some different earthenware. One time it was just shattered pieces of something, and the man looked rather upset when I couldn't tell him the age. The last car arrived after 5, and again they carried out the bags in the same way. I could have waited inside, but I was bored, so I put my earplugs in and went out to watch. This bag moved violently, and this time, when the leg pushed against the bag, it tore right through it. Being summer, it was still bright outside, and what I saw poking out of that bag looked like an animal with short black fur. And, unless I was mistaken, the tip of that leg looked like the reddish pincer of a crab. The sudden stench of animal filled the air. The man in the suit yelled something, and 7 or 8 workers came running out of the large prefab building. They grabbed the bag and tried to carry it away, but then I heard a low sound that seemed to bypass my earplugs, and I dropped to the ground as a massive pain gripped my head. The man grabbed me beneath my armpits and helped me up and into the office, but when I looked back in the direction of that sound, the bag was already gone, and 3 men were also doubled over on the ground, just like me. As soon as I sat down in the office, the pain in my head started to vanish. Your face is looking much better already. I'm sure you have many questions, the man said as he stood beside me. He paused a moment before continuing with a smile. I'm afraid I cannot answer them. It seemed that whatever was going on hadn't affected him at all. That night, they gave me a bento boxed meal, just like they did during lunch, and then guided me to the 2nd floor of the office. At the top of the narrow iron stairs was an iron door, and beyond that, a room with nothing but a bed. The toilet is just over there. There's no bath, however, so please make do for now. Also, please do not leave this room during the night. I'm terribly sorry, but we'll be locking you in. We'll unlock it when we bring you breakfast in the morning, the man said, in a tone harsher than any he'd used during the day. And then he left. I tried turning the door handle and, of course, it was locked. Looking around the room, there really was absolutely nothing there. Even the toilet was simple, basically just a chamber pot. And even though it was a prefab building, there was only one window. But when I pulled the curtains back, all I could see was the mountain slope and some bushes. Lying on the bed, I looked back at the events of the day, but nothing made sense. What on earth was that leg? What did it have to do with all the earthenware? My head didn't hurt anymore, and it wasn't like I'd done anything strenuous throughout the day either, but for some reason, I was absolutely exhausted. It was only just past 9 p.m, but by tomorrow night, I'd be 100,000 yen richer. And so, with that on my mind, I turned the lights off and decided to go to sleep. Suddenly, there was a loud bang that made me jump out of bed. I think the entire building shook. Turning the lights on, I ran over to the window and opened it. It was pure chaos outside. People were running around and screaming near that large prefab building, but of course I couldn't see what was going on. It sounded like they were speaking Chinese, but they were too fast and far away to really hear it. The stench of animal again filled the air. That same smell from earlier, but now it was starting to smell like something burning too. A fire? Shit, I've got to get out of here. As I ran for the door, it suddenly opened, and that man came in. "Your job is now over. We're leaving. Come with me," he said, pulling me out of the room. When I got downstairs, a black Mercedes-Benz was waiting. Around 20 men were standing around that large building, and several more were passed out on the ground. In the light of the headlights, I could see smoke and something black running around between the building. Then another person fell. The man shoved me into the car and then sat in the driver's seat. Turning around, I could see a fire at the bottom of that building. The inside had gone up in flames. The man slammed on the accelerator and we sped down the gravelly road. When we were about 200 meters away, suddenly there was an explosion even bigger than the one from before. Although the car's windows were tinted, I could still see outside, so I had a rough idea of where they had taken me, but I won't write that down here. Maybe because it was night, the 3-hour trip we had taken in was much shorter on the way back. However, the man didn't say a single thing the entire way, and his expression remained hardened. As I got out of the car, he took a thick envelope out of the dashboard and handed it to me with a smile. 200,000 yen, for your troubles. You no doubt wish to know what's going on. However, I am unable to tell you. And that's what happened. Sorry for such a long story. A big thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy tier members, Scarly and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 16, out right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.